Hello and welcome to the local marketing live stream with myself, Luke Hawley. And today I want to talk about service as theatre. And this is actually part one of an 8-part series around service design. And it's something that I've been wanting to share with you since the inception of the local marketing live stream. Something that I've observed for quite some time is there's not a lot of discussion, whether you go to networking events, business events, expos, conferences, you name it, not a lot of discussion around actually designing a service. It's just not as sexy as AI or social media marketing or mindset or whatever it might be that seems to dominate a lot of the discussion for business owners and entrepreneurs in this space. But my view is when it comes to service design, it actually represents probably the largest opportunities within your business. Really taking a step back and thinking about how you've designed this service, how you should design your service, or what should it look like. And that then becomes the foundation for your marketing. It also becomes the foundation for any AI automation that you want to do. Because it provides a depth of understanding of what it means to deliver the experience that you provide, the outcomes that you provide through the lens of your customer. And it is well worth taking the time to do this exercise. And because it's such it can be quite a big task, there's a lot of strategic choices to be made. I wanted to break this up into 8 parts. And I'm going to use the 7P framework. So for those of you who might recall your days at university, you'll love this as a bit of a recall. But translating it in a way that makes sense for the business owner, for the entrepreneur, to make strategic choices in their business, so to have that depth of understanding. And today we're going to start with an understanding of what we mean by a service and service design, and really looking at it service as theatre that will act as the foundation for the next 7 episodes. So I'm just going to turn on the live chat now. So let's just do that. So as always, if you have questions as we go through the content, you're absolutely welcome to reach out in the live chat. Or of course, if you're following up on this a little bit later, drop your questions in the comments. I'll keep an eye on it and respond as we go. And of course, you can email me anytime. Now, the content for today is also available for you to download. So I'll just start sharing my screen now. Great. So as always, you just come to the Buy Local Sunshine Coast website, buylocalsunshinecoast.com.au. Just jump to resources and then local marketing live stream articles. This is where you can catch up on all the episodes. So obviously today's episode 12, the content to come, but you'll be able to download the slides from today and the service design workbook, which is a workbook we'll revisit over the next 8 weeks. So definitely do jump on and check it out. This is what it looks like, just so you're curious. But it kind of walks you through this kind of designing your service in some detail as you go through. So you're going to find this very, very helpful as a workbook to work through over the next couple of weeks. So yeah, feel free to download that and start working through it. Alrighty, so let's jump straight in. And I want to kind of start with this scenario so that way you can reflect in terms of where you're at when it comes to how you think about your current service design. So you've got the one which is very common, right? So I see both of these very common, right? The first one is like could be a sparky, a bookkeeper, someone working from the spare room, no shop front, no reception, no uniform. So when you hear this idea of service design, you're thinking restaurants and hotels, right? People have got a foyer. So you don't think there's you're not really thinking about service design. You're just thinking about delivering on whatever it is that your profession is, right, or expertise is. And you've got the other one who does spend a bit of time thinking about what I call like the front of room. So you make sure you've got the nice logo, the signage, your van's wrapped, you've got like the nice uniform, so you show up properly, so the customer can see that you're polished. So you look good, but then the back end just doesn't support it. You're kind of quoting it at 9 p.m. the day before, kind of scrambling to keep track of things, maybe using notes instead of something a little bit more structured. So the behind the scenes is not supporting the way that you want to be seen or showing up in front of your customers, right? And it's not your fault, right? So yes, both sides haven't mapped it out. And they're not really sure what someone actually goes through in terms of what the buyer is. So Why this and why now? First, most local businesses on the Sunshine Coast are service-based, right? So close to 62%. And if you add hospitality to the other services, close to 72%. And that's a consistent thing across the country, across developed nations. Majority businesses are service-based, and most are, micro business owners, as we know. So most services are not designed, right? They actually stitch together from what everyone else appears to be doing. So it's almost like, because most service providers have worked for someone else, so they've seen how they operate and they kind of replicate that same kind of model, and very laser focused in, obviously, on just delivering on their expertise. So that's why most of us are not taking a step back and really thinking about, wait, is this designed in the most optimal way to deliver the outcomes that I'm expecting? And here's the thing, right, is if we're not spending time thinking about all the strategic choices we need to make in the design of our service, what tends to happen is when things aren't quite working, or the experience isn't quite right, or our feedback's a little bit mixed from our customers, the temptation is to jump straight to promotion. I'm going to advertise more, I'm going to advertise more. And that's often how we think about marketing, right? Just through the lens of advertising. But you cannot promote your way out of a service you have not designed. And in this 8-part series, promotion is going to be the last thing I talk about, because, to be honest, it should be the last thing you think about. Jumping the gun on advertising is the fastest way to lose money, right? Because Facebook and Google and these other advertising platforms, they'll take every dollar you give it. And they're not going to do the audit to make sure you've got the right offer presented to the right people at the right time. And it can be costly. And if you don't have the infrastructure set up to support an increase in demand, it can undermine the entire investment. So very, very important to think about the actual full design. Have we got it mapped out? Do we know what each of the steps are? So that way we feel comfortable in promoting it. The other key thing here too is that, and I'll build on this as we get to it, but I'm sure you've experienced it. When you jump online, you do a Google search, let's say I'm looking for a plumber near me. I jump on and it feels like every website's the same, right? And I've shared this point before in previous episodes, right? The sameness is not just as a result of getting a website done by a developer that's not specializing in creating content. They obviously focus a lot more on the technical aspects of website design. So they haven't really thought through the strategy. But it is a tricky thing to, like, what is the point of difference from plumber A and plumber B, or painter A and painter B? Because the sense is, well, I'm just painting the interior of your house. And the language as a result, when you go through site to site, ends up being like a shared language, right? In a way that feels like that every provider is kind of using the same kind of terms, the same kind of language to describe who they are and what they're doing, the point of difference. And because everyone's using the same words, it doesn't feel like any real distinction has been made. When you go through this process and actually map out the journey of your customer, and thinking about service as theatre, you'll start to identify the things that you are doing that's actually quite unique, quite different, and actually provides a real point of difference in the outcome and the experience of your customer. So this work will actually help you be much more effective in promotion, because you know what to highlight, what you're doing that the others can't keep up with, that have ignored, that have missed, that you can highlight is why you're the most trusted local business in your area. So I'm going to call this the big three. I'm going to repeat this each week, because I think this is essential whenever it comes to making a strategic choice around the marketing of your business. Right? So 3 big things here. First, your positioning strategy. You need to have made a choice on what is it you want to be known for in the market. Is it the best quality, right? Is it the most affordable price? Is it the best customer service? Whatever it is that you've kind of pinpointed that's the thing I want to be known for, right? I'm the best in the market, I'm the best for high-end homes, I'm the best for property net, like whatever that kind of, when you've kind of clarity on your positioning. It's not a niche, right? It's not deciding your customer. Positioning is about your reputation. Think about like what your logo represents. What is it you want to be known for? When you leave the room, how would someone describe you and your business as a point of difference to the others provided? Right? So positioning strategy is a choice. What is it I want to be known for in the market, and sticking with it? And in a later episode, I'll probably do that after this 8-part series. I'll spend a little bit of time around how to make that choice around positioning strategy. Target market, we covered a bit in episode 10 in a bit of detail, but again, you get to make this choice. Who is it that you're going to serve, right? So I really like the combination of the two. Of the target market is who you serve, and positioning strategy is how you serve them, right? So your point of difference. And then insights from your marketing environment. So I cannot stress this enough that if you are making strategic choices when it relates to your business, it must be based on insight. And by insight, I mean just information or data that's helpful in your decision making. And that can come from doing some Google search. It could be looking at your competitors' websites. It could be looking at industry reports. It might also be, let's come to here. So it might also be just reading reviews and feedback from your pages and your competitors' pages. Maybe you to kind of do a mystery shop yourself, whether it's your own business or your competitors, to get a bit of an idea of what the experience is like in the market. Walk alongs can be helpful too, in terms of like just checking out, acting like you're a customer and kind of going through the experience yourself. Expos, conferences, trade shows, these things can be very, very helpful too in understanding what's going on in the marketing environment. I've mentioned this in previous episodes, but follow thought leaders in your industry on LinkedIn. Have a couple of blogs that you might follow, some newsletters that come to your inbox, but make sure you're finding passive ways to stay in touch with what's going on in your industry. So you can, when it comes to making big decisions around what's going to be my product, how I'm going to refine my offer, what price I'm going to go out as, what processes I might implement. Those kind of key strategic choices feel like they're anchored in something. And the trick is not to know everything. It's just to make sure that you're confident in the choice that you're making and that it is anchored in some data, some piece of information that increases the odds of it being successful, right? There's no guarantees in marketing, as we know, but we can improve the odds, right? We can increase the likelihood of success by using good quality research. All right, so being across it. Alrighty, so let's now jump into the weeds a little bit more. I'm going to start with your business as a performance. So this idea of service as theater. And I really do like thinking service through this lens because it helps us to kind of contextualize it very differently to how we typically think of marketing through an idea of a product, right? Some physical thing that's sold online or in a store. For most of us that are watching, we deliver a service and it's just different, right? And the experience is different, right? So we have actors, right? Those who know the choreograph, right? They know the script. They are, and you, right? You perform, right? In front of your customer. You deliver on your expertise. You share your wisdom, your knowledge, and it is a curated experience in order for them to feel confident, to feel comfortable, in order for them to get the results they're looking for. So it is something that is scripted, is choreographed, it is a clear behavior, and something that's meant to be repeatable, each night that the performance is done. Then you got the audience, right, which is the customers. And for many services, this is a shared experience, right? It's, sometimes the service is one-to-one, but sometimes the service is one-to-many. They come to your workshop, they come to your event, there might be multiple people coming to your office. People are experiences shared often by other customers, and that can have an impact on the experience. If the wrong people in the room, if they're disruptive, if they're noisy, if they're complaining, it can deteriorate the overall experience. We can all, think of times where we've gone out, for a night out, maybe in our youth, right, going out to clubs. Some nights were better than others, and it often came down to the people, right, the vibes, and it just felt like everything was kind of clicking, everyone was kind of vibing together, and kind of elevated the experience. So that's where audience kicks in, and it's really important to think about that. Not just what's the experience your customer have, but what's the experience being created between customers, right? What's the influence they're having on each other? Then the setting, right? And this is also important too. When it comes to front of stage, what space are you creating? Does it feel, warm and welcoming? Bringing nature in terms of like an office space with plants. We're going to spend a lot of time with that in one of the later episodes around physical evidence. Like, what is it that we can create that helps to provide that we understand the expectations of the performance, we're comfortable, and it's easy. We don't feel like we're enduring the service of the performance, but we're comfortably kind of progressing through. And then the performance, right? The whole thing coming together to deliver the show. So bringing that into mind, right? And I think this is important too. An experience occurs when a company intentionally uses services as the stage and goods as props to engage individual customers in a way that creates a memorable event, right? And that's the key, right? We are invoking, right, action. We're invoking thoughts. We're invoking emotions. It is meant to be memorable. It's meant to have an impact. That's why we do what we do. So it's important we're thinking about that. All right. So a couple of examples, right, help kind of contextualize this a little bit more in terms of like front of house and back of house, in terms of what's visible to the customer and what's not visible to the customer. And again, very important context for service delivery, especially as we start to get into mapping. So an example here, a law firm, right? Front is how the lawyer deals with you, right? And the back is like the admin staff that supports the lawyer and the software running it all underneath, right? The stuff you don't see that's being done to support the lawyer and giving you advice. The cafe, right? The front is the exterior, the greeting, the coffee. So the experience that we have in the cafe, and the back of house is the rostering, the supplies, the materials, that the staff are actually supported, all that type of stuff that happens behind the scenes, the chef, the kitchen, those things as well. And then a tradie, right? Front of house is the branded van, the uniform, the organized gear, and the back of room is the where they quote, where they're doing the admin, that stuff in terms of behind the scenes, keeping track of what's going on, the materials, all that type of stuff as well. Right, and just kind of an example of that, right? So we're going to go into this a bit more detail in a later segment, but van, here's what the customer sees: front of house, the van pulling into the street, the uniform and the organized gear of the individual, the quote landing in their inbox to tidy up before they leave, the job's done, versus this stuff, right, what they see behind the scenes. So when we're thinking about service as theater, we're separating it out from what is seen, right, the line of visibility, and what's not seen. But obviously this makes this possible, right? In the interactions between these steps and the flow of information is really important to understand. Let me just I forgot to put up my chat. Let me just put that back here. Sorry, in case you're asking questions. Cool. Here we go. Talking to an electrician friend about this. Awesome. That's really great to hear, because it does make a world of difference. And particularly, any kind of home delivery, any home service can really benefit from thinking about service design. Alrighty. So those finer details do not just win you the job; they let you put your prices up. And I do mean this, right? If you look great front of house and the service is fast, efficient, right? It builds that confidence, builds that assurance, gives you a competitor's edge. That's what's going to make people feel much more comfortable in investing more with you. That's how you move from doing just residential work to commercial work, because the systems are in place, the designs in place that helps build that trust, helps build that confidence that you'll deliver consistently every single time, right? You deliver on your promises because the performance is in place to ensure you get exactly that. And when you nail this, that's when you feel much more confident in increasing your prices. And I do think that's essential for all service businesses to really, and we'll get to that in the prices episode, thinking about how to increase prices in a way that reflects the value that you provide as you get better and better at what you do. Alrighty, so the next thing I want to highlight before we jump into blueprinting is, why is it so difficult? Right? What makes services kind of uniquely challenging when it comes to marketing? So service marketing to be effective and successful requires a mirror opposite view of conventional product practices, right? And I see this all the time, using the electrician example from the chat, right? Selling electrical services in the same way that you're looking to sell sunglasses, right? Or a cake from a store or whatever it might be. That's the mistake, right? Because people are evaluating and making choices differently when it comes to services. And the key difference, right, is, and an electrician is a great example, is as an electrician, you're coming into my home, right? I'm not just buying something off the store, and I can touch it, I can feel it, I can see if it's reliable, and so the risk can be relatively small. For electrician, you're coming into my home, right? The stakes are just immediately higher. And you're also now responsible for the safety of me and my family. Because if you make a bad decision or you make a bad choice, that could cost us in a way that could be unimaginable, right? So the stakes are just higher. And I'm not an electrician, so I don't know if you're using the right approach, right? I don't know if you're using the right equipment, right? There might be a qualification on the website, but how do I know that that's the right qualification to have, right? I'm not able to assess your expertise in the same way that I can assess whether I like a coffee or not, right? So the stakes are just immediately higher. So the marketing for it is different. Hence this idea here of intangibility is not a modifier, it's a state. All right, so it's a different thing that we're doing here. And the challenge, as we can see here, is when it comes to the variation between products and services, as the more pure the service becomes, right, versus a combination like your fast food outlets and cafes, where it has a mix of like there's products we're being sold, but we're also delivering an experience as well. Given the double up maybe should have been retails, there's a bit of an overlap. When we get into this where it is far more service led, the ability for us to evaluate gets so much more difficult because of the intangibility of it, right? So here's the key characteristics, right, of a service that I'll keep reinforcing this. So intangibility is key. Nothing to hold, nothing to hand over the counter. You cannot show it before you sell it, right? Inseparability, right? A service isn't done unless there's an involvement between myself or something I own, right? You service my car, but you can't service my car unless I give you my car, right? An electrician can't service my home unless they come to my home, right? The massage therapist can't give me a massage unless I'm there to receive the massage, right? Heterogeneity, right? So no two deliveries are quite alike. So that's a real challenge. There's always some nuance. There's always a little bit of difference. We can try through processes to minimize the differences between service delivery, but there's always going to be something different because it's often a co-creation, right? My getting me getting a massage can be different to someone else getting a massage because our expectations are different. What pain points we have, what preferences around pain, all those things, those variabilities come into this, right? And then perishability, right, which is a real hard thing for service providers, is that I had some bookings yesterday, someone didn't take it up, I can't warehouse that and sell it in the future. So once that appointment's gone or once that time spot is gone, it's gone. All right. So again, that's kind of what makes it another challenge as well, is that these things can't be warehoused. So as alluded to, it's difficult. It becomes much more difficult to evaluate a service, right? Now we can do a little bit of search, right? We can do some comparisons, what we can find online. You've got experience qualities, the stuff that we can check as well. So our judgment before and after will help inform the choices we make in the future. So, as you know, if you used an electrician before, the next time you use an electrician, your expectations are made more clear based on that previous experience. So your experience kind of informs or teaches you as you move forward. And then the creators piece, which is the most difficult, right? In terms of assessing or judging expertise, can be really, really difficult. So kind of brings it down to this core question. How do you judge a lawyer when you do not understand the law, or a mechanic when you do not understand cars? Can't, right? So you're just being quite trusting. And this is, I kind of wanted to share this study because I actually found this really interesting to help kind of bring this point along around the challenge, right, of service delivery. So there was this study done where this individual was sent to 180 different dentists. Now, this individual did not need any treatment, right? So he had very healthy teeth, confirmed right prior to this field study that he just needed a checkup, but no treatment, right? So went to 180 dentists and a quarter of them recommended additional treatment, right? Now, not a knock on dentists, right? It's just kind of highlighting that variability, right, in services, right? Because the person who's delivering it is also the person selling it, right? The incentives are there, which helps to create this kind of uncertainty around it. The other thing that was really interesting from this kind of like this particular study in kind of clinical healthcare, which I found just fascinating, was this idea of how we review the experience. And what does that then translate to? Say like Google reviews, or like how we kind of give feedback or testimonials from a service experience. And what was interesting is in this study is they found that the consumer ratings and measured performance were actually disconnected, which is weird, right? You think, well, hold on a second. If I'm going to get healthcare, wouldn't it be like directly connected to the performance, to the outcomes? And it wasn't, right? This idea of that the reviews were actually based on this latent construct that was unrelated to performance, right? Which means there was something else that was kind of driving it. And this chart helps to bring it together. Is this idea of that when we assess a service, it is a combination of the worst moment and the last moment, right? And kind of reinforce further of and here's where the research kind of says almost nothing, right? When it comes to, it's not about the length of the experience, right? For those who are trying to chase this faster and faster, it is the worst moment and the final moment that do almost all of the self-reflection. And that kind of combination of, whether it's a long wait or bad vibes or awkward customers in the room or whatever it was that kind of created the worst moment. Plus, whatever that final moment was, like, was it euphoric? Did it feel like I was delighted? Did it feel like I got satisfaction? Those two things then actually dominate the way that people assess performance, right? So they ended up having this kind of standard score across all the different performance metrics because of these two things. This is why service design matters, right? Because if you don't know what creates the worst moment for your customers, and you don't know what the feeling is or the reaction is at the final moment, then you may be missing. Then people may be coming out feeling like, right, about the delivery. And this, again, using an electrician as an example, if it felt like I needed to wait, 1 week to get a quote, I couldn't rely on you to come in on time. So like there was just a bit of a wait and uncertainty. And in the final moment, I got an invoice that felt like a surprise, higher than I thought. And the workmanship just felt a little dodgy or like just not clear, right? That ends up being the reflection on the entire service, even though that electrician might have provided the best quality outcome, right? That his expertise, his experience, decades of experience probably made sure that, let's say I was doing like a safety switch update, it's the best possible safety switch update imaginable. But because there was a bit of a delay, right? And the vibes weren't quite right. The attitude was a little bit off, a little bit scrubby. And then the invoice was higher than expected or wasn't managed. All of a sudden, the person feels like that was a terrible experience, despite the expertise that was provided. That's why this matters. Right. Twice as bad is remembered more than twice as long. Twice as bad is remembered more than twice as long. Righty. I think I kind of hit that part right, but because people aren't taking the time to understand the process, everyone's saying quality workmanship, competitive pricing, family owned and operated. Like these are all the same words that people are using. Good. It's probably necessary to say that you tick those boxes as well. But the real point of difference might be somewhere else, right? That your worst moment maybe doesn't happen, right? Or this is up here a little bit more, right? The final moment, right? There are things that you can control that can completely transform that impact. Alrighty, let's, and then the other thing here too is, the idea here is we're not looking for adjectives, new ways to describe what you do. We're looking for specifics, the things you actually do, right, that leads to better outcomes. So I'm not getting these worst moments, right? I think we talk about it in the next segment, but this idea of moments of truth, these real experiences that deliver a sense of, did this work or did this not work? Am I satisfied? Right? The thing I want to highlight too is we're kind of getting now to the final segment here, the blueprint. Is the development of a service is usually characterized by trial and error. What I mean by this is that mistakes are meant to happen, right? This is a service. I've already talked about the characteristics. There are a lot of challenges that come into play in designing a service. And I think it's really important to kind of take the approach of continuously seeking that level of perfection, right? This isn't something that's set and forget, that you design it once and move on and never look at it again. It's an iterative process, right? We're always looking for ways, right, to get rid of this, right? So we're getting new information, we're getting new feedback, new reviews. We're trying out potentially new software. We have new staff or team members, new ways of delivering the service, whatever it might be. But we want to remain really conscious and aware of, is this leading to better experiences, better outcomes for our customers, that leads to far more positive reviews. And if the feedback is we're getting it's not quite delivering what we expected, we need to hear it and we need to respond to it in a way that creates the opportunities that we're looking for. So with that, I think it's important to map it out. And this process that I'll kind of walk you through, and obviously it's available in the workbook. This is actually something that I've recommended to businesses do before they even start looking at AI automation, right? If you're kind of down that path, like, man, I gotta use artificial intelligence and generative AI, and I'm gonna bring in all the agents, and I'm gonna create an entire agent team around me, and I'm gonna do all these amazing things. Um, and you can, but if you haven't actually taken a step back and mapped out the entire service journey, right, blueprinted it, not just the flow chart, not just 1 + 1 = 2, but really thought about the interactions from from what the customer sees, from your frontline staff, to your support team, to your systems and processes you use. What's the flow of information, and how does it progress as the customer moves from initiation to closure or follow up post service delivery? Until you map that full picture out, you won't really see what the true opportunity is when it comes to implementing these kind of new systems and processes. So it's not just for marketing. Doing this will set you up for a variety of strategic choices you'll make in your business. All right. So nice and simple, relatively speaking, I guess. But we're trying to map out the entire customer journey from what are the things they're interacting with, right? So we call this physical evidence. So the things they're touching, engaging, typing, like what are the things they're actually interacting with? What are then their customer actions, right? Right. And then the on stage. So what does the interactions look like between you and them, right? Or your online materials, or the stuff you're doing with their assets. Like, so we're mapping that out, right? The things they're interacting with, the interaction with their actions, the on stage, and then your backstage process. So what are your support team doing, and what are your systems, your software, your ordering, supply chain, warehousing, like all everything that kind of comes to delivery of each of these steps. All right, we want to map it out. I'm going to share some examples shortly. Alrighty, so we'll clarify this line of interaction between the customer and your on-stage people. Cross it, and a moment of truth has just happened. Line of visibility, right? Seen by customer and not seen by customer by necessary performance, right? So that's kind of the line of what's seen and what's not seen. And the line of internal interaction between your people and the systems holding them up. So the three key definitions here. So every time the line of interaction is crossed via a link from a customer to a contact employee, a moment of truth has occurred. And I'm a big believer in this. And for those that have followed me for a while, I've spoken about moments of truth a few times. It's essentially this, right? These moments of truth is what dictates, like this line chart again, these are moments of truth, right? The interaction between customer, right, and your employee, even AI agent, whatever it might be, those moments of truth is what dictates whether people are satisfied, delighted, right, or they unsatisfied, right? This is where those failure points can occur. Mistakes can happen. And if you're not able to correct, to adjust, to address, right, to acknowledge, because moments of truth can turn, even a negative moment of truth can be turned into a positive if it's acknowledged and treated with respect, and approached in the right way, right? So these things are important to identify, and make sure that we're building systems around it. Alrighty, so I mentioned I'll share some simple examples, right? So same trade, fully mapped. So we're looking at here for a trading. Physical evidence. So notice this is a problem. This is kind of the typical pro that notes a problem, gets in touch, you quote, you do the work, you follow up. Overly simplified, by the way. But I wanted to kind of, something we can kind of fit on a screen as a good place to start, but then you'll build out more steps. And it can obviously be a much, much larger workflow. So they check out Google reviews, got a booking form or voicing mail. They might use a quote document themselves, and then you show up, right? And then you invoice with a thank you note. Customer actions, they might also speak to the neighbor, rings or fills the form, right? Depending on, so this is what they can interact with, this is what they choose to do. Reads it, compares and waits for whatever the next step is, lets you stay in or stays or leaves, page reviews or forgets, right? In terms of follow-up. On stage, nothing because you're not there yet. You answer or you do not, right? In terms of the phone call or the booking form, you send it and explain it. And what's the quality sitting behind that? Do they understand the quote? The variations that might occur. You work, you talk, you tidy. So you do it, good workmanship. And then you ask for the review at the end. Or maybe you provide them some advice on how to maintain the thing for longer so they don't have to come in and get another fix. Backstage, someone keeps the listing fresh, right? So the reviews are active, inquiry gets written down, right? Particularly if they call or added to a CRM, whatever it might be. Pricing up at night, potentially, hopefully not, right? Maybe you got a system in place that helps to provide good quality quotes. We can understand you're doing Loom videos to help provide you quote, whatever it might be. Materials were ordered on Friday, so there's a system in place. So you show up ready to deliver the work, invoice raised, review chased. Support processes, right? So things to make all this work, website hosting, review requests, phone, form, calendar. These are active and not down because of random issues. Pricing sheet, supplier costs. Something you need to create the quote is readily available to do the work, supplier stock insurance, all the things you need to deliver the work, and also your accounting review system. So all this starts to layer in, right? And you start to see when you start to map it out, all the different things that can impact the overall service experience, and also creating opportunities for points of difference, things that you can do, right? Maybe you have a superior quoting system, right? That's fast and reliable. Maybe it's more explanatory, in terms of using videos. There's a variety of things that you can look at each stage that gives you an edge over the other guys. Right, so when you're putting together your map, you're looking for these things. So what are the fail points? So any step where the thing can go wrong, right? The identification of fail points and the design of fail-safe processes are critical. You're hunting for them. So not to feel bad, just so you can put the patch together, right? And also, this is obviously from this research by Scott Hurst. So Showstack was the writer of this, the author of this. Ran into a standard 2 minutes. So standards and tolerance, right? So what does good look like having that cleared? Do you reply to emails within 72 hours, or is it a sunset clause? Like really being clear on what the expectations are around communication, around responses times, quality of quotes, information, all of that. Cool. So what the map shows you, right? And here's an example here. This example here is actually from my experience, right? So one of the things I did with Procter & Gamble is I worked on the brand Clear Blue for many years, right? And we implemented, actually used the 7 Ps in partnership with the entire pharmacy category, and looking at how do we make sure, the goal here is about how do we make sure that Clear Blue looks and feels number one in every store that you go into. And it started by, I went around and actually got my merchandisers to take photos of the shelf. And there was over 1,000 photos taken, right? And it was pretty clear we did not look number one on shelf, right? So that was the key takeaway there. It's like, oh, we did not look good. So then I had to think about, okay, well, what is the steps involved in order for us to look number one on shelf? Because it's not just about product placement. It requires, the pharmacist, the pharmacy staff, thinking about how product design, how packaging, how we show up from our merchandisers, the training we provide. There are multiple layers that kind of go into this step in order to make sure we're delivering on this larger goal. Because if we look number one on shelf, we will be number one when it comes to sales. And this worked, by the way. So Clear Blue had huge growth during this period by focusing in on how do we win, how do we look number one in every single pharmacy store. Right. And we knew these insights, right, that, she's only spending 60 seconds at the shelf. So she wants to clear decision-making. So very easy to kind of pinpoint the difference. It should be very easy to kind of pick up the box and understand its point of difference compared to the others. And the information, because she may not have gone online to look, may not be comfortable when speaking to the pharmacist. So the shelf does need to do a little bit of education or provide a little bit of information to help guide decision-making. So mapping it out really helped. And I'll come back to this example of Clear Blue throughout the 8 weeks because it truly was transformative for the category and for the brand by taking this approach. But it did start by mapping it out, right? And trying to understand how do we look number one on shelf. So we didn't change the product. We just changed everything around the product, right? We took these insights, we took this understanding, we took these 1,000 photos where we did not look great on shelf, and then we had to put a plan in and go, great, what does it mean to look number one on shelf? What are the steps that we need to take to get there? Because in that case, we're partnering with the retailer in order to deliver the experience, to deliver the service of product selection, to then they choose the product itself. It's a very different approach to it. So look, examples here, right? 3 businesses, 3 very different maps. trade, service happens at their place, so the living room is your set and the van is your shop front. The first fail point for almost every trade here is the gap between I'll get you a price and a price arriving. Very common, right? The number one complaint most people have is waiting for a quote. The cafe, right? Row 5 decides everything and the customer never sees a line of it. You notice who else there at 8 a.m. So again, the whole experience, right, of the cafe. How long they wait, the quality of the coffee, the aesthetics, the aroma, the vibes, the comfort for meetings, the space, all that stuff comes into it. The broker, most of the value is invisible and the customer often cannot judge it even afterwards, right? Very difficult to assess, say a mortgage broker in this case. Did I get the best possible advice? Have they really gone through and checked all 60, loan options to put forward this recommendation? And I'm kind of trusting that this is indeed the right recommendation for me based on my circumstances and situation. But there's a lot that they can do around the physical evidence and processes in order to kind of showcase the proof that that investigation, that depth of work has been done to build that confidence of outcome. So I highly recommend you start working on this for your business. If you're an operator that has more than one service, right? So, for me, I do buy local campaigns, I do websites, and I host networking events and workshops. So there are 3 different services, and each of those services would have a different blueprint, right? So I would recommend just focusing on one service and do one blueprint at a time, and start with your most important, your most high value service and really map it out. As I shared, I've got the workbook for you, right? And obviously this is for the full 8-week episode. So it kind of kicks off with making sure you're spending time with the big 3. So you're really cleaning positioning strategy, your target market, and those insights from your marketing environment, right? So you're kind of keeping this kind of collected in one place. Define your service, right? So really think about kind of where do you fit on this tangent, right? What are customers actually checking? So starting to kind of fill in the details. And then I've given you the space here to start to do your blueprint. And obviously we'll go into a lot of this stuff in the coming weeks, but you can start to kind of step this out. I made sure you had full 10 steps in there as well, set up so the 2 pages can be put next to each other, so you can start to map this out for your service. And obviously from there, you can start to pull in a bunch of things in terms of strategic choices as we evolve over the next couple of weeks. Cool. So a lot to consider, a lot to think about. So I encourage you to get started on working through that blueprint. You always have me available as a resource. Also join Buy Local Sunshine Coast as a member, free way to promote your organization. Of course, the marketing clarity section. So as you start to pull this together with your service blueprint, but you do want a second set of eyes where we're reviewing it together, kind of challenging you on each of those steps, and really making sure you've got something that is then helpful to make the larger strategic choices you're looking to make, whether it's around the adoption of artificial intelligence, whether it's introducing a new marketing campaign, or you're looking to scale. So you want to kind of, get the standard operating procedures in place to support the scale of your business. I'm here to help, right? And if you've made it this far into the live stream, just use the coupon code LIVE, and I'll give you a $100 discount from that booking. And the links are available if you're checking out this through the page I was at before. So I'll just go here. Let me bring it over here. Here we go. So you see it here, book marketing clarity session. So I always put that near the top and near the bottom of those pages. So you've always got it. Cool. So that's all I want to cover today. Let me just hit stop share. Bring this back up here. There we go. Great. So I hope you found that really helpful. I'm really looking forward to walking you through now the 7 Ps service marketing, and really help guide you in this kind of really important strategic choices you're going to make. And doing this is going to have such a huge impact on your business well before you start to invest in advertising, before you start investing in artificial intelligence or systems updates for your business. You're going to find this really, really helpful. Thank you for taking the time. And I'll see you same time next week.